two prominent Southeast Texans encouraging our community to have a candid conversation about race. KFDM's Angel San Juan joins us in the studio to share what they are saying about the state of race relations in our area. Angel?
Both Jefferson County Sheriff Zena Stevens and Beaumont Attorney James Payne were born in the late to mid 1960s when the white and black communities in Southeast Texas, for the most part, led separate existences. Through the decades, race relations have improved, but maybe not as much as we would have hoped. Jefferson County Sheriff Zena Stevens and Beaumont Attorney James Payne have a lot in common, both from Southeast Texas, in their 50s, who are respected leaders in our community. Their similarities go back to their childhoods, born in a world and time where neither imagined they'd be in the roles they're in now.
I did not have a white student in my classroom until I got to college. So for the most part, though we were legally integrated, we were socially still separate.
Even when it came to the young James Payne wanting pizza.
The pizza place didn't deliver on my side of town, so I couldn't get a delivered pizza until I went off to college.
That racial divide in the late 60s and early 70s prevented Stevens from imagining a lifelong career in law enforcement.
Because I never saw any, African Americans who were in that role. Most experiences with black people and law enforcement were not positive. And so I didn't have a dream of being, a police officer, or certainly not a sheriff.
But in 2016, Stevens broke racial and gender barriers to become the first female black sheriff in Texas. Tuesday, she won re-election.
Also, the fact that I'm the first tells you we have a long way to go, because I'm not the first African American female, I'm certain, that has been qualified to do this job, or the first African American that's qualified to do this job in our county. And so, I understand we have a long way to go.
My Letterman jacket, my wife had it framed.
Payne became a lawyer, breaking barriers of his own. Hired to the prestigious Provost Humphrey law firm in 1995, the firm's first African-American licensed attorney. Unlike Stevens, Payne has never been a political candidate, yet he knows the importance of having representation that reflects the community, and that's achieved through elections.
Our power is in the vote, and I've always felt that. Not just because of what our ancestors did as far as getting us the right to vote. I've always felt our power was really in our vote, because economically we are not in a position, I say we, minorities generally, do not have the economic resources.
Payne says running for office is expensive, and that cost has limited minority participation in politics. That's why in 2018, Payne decided to help shift control from wealthy kingmakers to people power with his One Reaches Seven campaign.
The concept is I vote, and then I encourage 7 of my friends to vote, and then my friends then encourage 7 of their friends to vote, and it creates basically a pyramid. Well, to do that right now, it doesn't require a lot of resources. Actually, all it requires is me picking up the phone and calling 7 of my friends.
And it appears to be paying huge dividends. Minority participation at the polls is on the rise, which sets the stage for a new generation of diverse leaders.
Having someone like me in office, it creates the dialogue. It creates a learning experience.
This memorial in Beaumont honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. symbolizes the advancements that have been made here in Southeast Texas in race relations. But those who have tried to help to fulfill his dream say more needs to be done.
There are still lawyers in this community, lawyers, that are still striking jurors, or basically removing jurors from the process based on race. You would think if there's ever a place where race should not matter and justice should prevail, you would think it would be in the courthouse.
Sheriff Stevens touts her support that crosses racial, ethnic, and political lines, a united coalition. Yet during her campaigns, she's also endured racism.
Terms where I was called a knuckle dragger, terms that were placed in social media about lynchings or hanging, me or my family members from trees. Racism still exists. The good thing about racism is it fuels my fire. I want you to know it doesn't frighten me, and it doesn't frighten or make me afraid. It makes me it challenges me to do better.
Even when held to a different standard.
People count when I promote or hire people if they're black. Under a white sheriff or other sheriffs across the country, if they hire 200 white people, nobody cares.
But Stevens knows she's now in a position to tackle systemic racism from within the system.
Sometimes it's simple things. Within the last 4 years, I created a policy that allowed African American women to wear their hair naturally. It was a policy, and it was thought to be exotic hairstyle to wear braids to work, which is something natural in African American communities. And so we created a policy to let people wear their hair the way God gave it to them.
This frank talk is what Payne says needs to happen more often in Southeast Texas.
If we never have that dialogue, we just stay separate. And so I encourage the conversation. White, black, brown, doesn't matter. And even if your view is different than mine, that's okay. Let's have the conversation. But not having a conversation keeps me in isolation.
People in our community know better than I do who the racists are, because they say that stuff in your presence. They don't say it in my presence, the jokes and those things. And so if you allow that, if you laugh at that and you think that's okay, then you're part of the problem.
A problem that both Payne and Stevens have spent their lives working to solve. Their shared histories on race relations in Southeast Texas, teaching them it takes a united front to overcome division.
I'm hoping that at some point when this election is over or this cycle is over, we can get back to America and not my America or your America.
And James Payne also points out that 50% of the people who are taking the bar exam right now are women, yet the Jefferson County Courthouse does not reflect that. An example, there's only one female judge. He also says our courts are not representative of the ethnic diversity in our community. Tiffany?